If you talk to some people in the model train community, they'll tell you that the track work is as much a part of the model as the scenery is. For this reason, they choose to hand lay their track over methods such as pre-made flex track. Well, in my case, I'm actually doing it because I like the look of it because I'm modeling narrow gauge. So let's talk about how to hand lay model train track. So this is going to be On30 hand-laid track. So the track gauge is the same as HO. We're using HO scale rail, all that stuff. I have successfully hand-laid N scale track before. It's a little bit more fiddly, but it's completely doable. So the items you will need are going to be some glue, track ties. These have been pre-stained by me. Three-point track gauges. In this case, I'm using 2 of them, and I'll explain why. Model spikes, some method of cutting the rail, and these are somewhat of a luxury item, but if you're planning on handling a lot of track, these are special spiking pliers, which literally have a T cut in there to hold the spike. Alternatively, you can use needle nose pliers, but I find these make life so much better. If you plan on handling a lot of track, they're well worth the money. Also, lastly, you're going to need some rail. I'll be explaining that in a minute. So this is going to be the cassette that holds the rail car. So we have the locomotive, we have a rail car, allows us to move it around or even switch out different trains. And because I have 4 of them, if I need to, I can join them together and make a longer one if need be. So that's what this is going to be used for. So the very first step is we need some ties. These are HO scale wood ties that I believe I picked up at a train show or off eBay for a ridiculously cheap price. I've stained them using some Micromark wood stain, and they honestly look absolutely incredible. Now for our little cassette, we could easily use flex track, but I'm trying to use up stuff that I have lying around, and some people have actually asked me about hand laying track, so I figured why not do a video about it. Now in this case, we have ourselves the strip right here. We're going to take and apply our ties by hand, and spacing is nothing super important. Just do what you like. I personally tend to space the ties a little bit closer together towards the front, but I am also leaving a little bit of a gap, so if I have a rail joiner to connect modules, it won't hit. Okay, we now have our ties laid out on here. So the next obvious step is we need to let this guy dry out. To help make sure everything stays flat, I'm going to place a second piece on top with some weight, and I'm probably going to put some wax paper in between just so the pieces don't stick. Once the glue is dried, then we can come back, talk about the track. Okay. Now comes the fun part, which is spiking. The glue has had enough time to set up, so ties shouldn't shift on me. And I just have a piece of scrap code 83 HO rail. Some people like to use thicker rail, some people like to use thinner rail. You know what? It's kind of a case of personal opinions here. So the big thing is we need to lay down our first rail, then we can set our width for the other one. So what I've done is I've just made a rough mark at about where it would be halfway on either side for the track. Then we can take our spiking pliers and our spikes, and we can get around to the process of spiking. Now this is where having spiking pliers is very nice. is, I'll try and show it, but because of focus issues, they have the little groove in there, they have the little part that holds the spike, and now it's in there. So now all you have to do is just line your rail up, push your spike in a little bit, pull it out, push it back down, do the same on the other side, and repeat. And I'll try and do a close-up as well for you guys. Okay, when it comes to spacing out your spiked ties, what I like to do is for the first 3 or 4 ties, I like to spike them. Then I'll skip about 2 or 3 ties, spike, skip another 2 or 3 ties and spike, skip another 2 or 3 ties and spike, and go from there. Around joints, I like to have it a little more frequently spiked, and on curves, I'll usually spike every tie. Even though I have a track bending tool, loads on curves tend to be more anyways, so I just don't want things getting kinked and out of spec. So let me try and set up to do a close-up to show you guys what it's like putting the spikes in. Okay, sorry guys that the focus on this is pretty bad. I'm doing the best that I can with my GoPro, but here I have my spike and my spike pliers, so I just pinch that guy into there. It's held in place, and now we just come along and spike. So for the first part, it's not going to go in very far, don't worry. Then you take it out, you push down again, you've spiked. And repeat the process. Put your spike in, start it, pull out. Sometimes you have to rotate the head of the spike if you spiked a little too close. Snug it down. Job done. So now what I can do is I can skip about, I'm going to go about every 2 ties, and then on the third one, I'm going to spike. So we have one side spiked down, and as you can see, it is relatively straight. I mean, it's probably not perfect, but it's not the end of the world. It's just a little railroad car cassette. So now we can bring in our little track gauges. Now, I had mentioned there's a reason why I like using 2 of them, and what I like to do is I like to have them offset, so that way I find the rail gets held better, and also if you're working on curves, it gives you a little bit wider of a clearance, which is actually beneficial as it helps the train track around it a little better. So here we have this, and we're going to space it out a little ways apart, nothing that crazy, and then we're just going to repeat the process. Now for the first few spikings, you do have to be very careful that you don't bump anything by accident. So what I like to do is I like to hold the track gauge down with one finger, then carefully put in a few spikes with the other, and then go from there. Okay, so for the final part, the real question is, does stuff roll on and off? Now mind you, I have no actual physical way at this point of connecting this guy to this guy, so literally it's just being done by eyeball. But the big question is, how well does the rail car roll on the cassette? And based off what I've seen, it rolls really nice. Now over here, I need to clean up some of the track work and stuff from my ballasting operation, but that's a whole other story in and of itself. So I'm going to call this a resounding success, and as you can see, the siding is long enough to hold the locomotive and the rail car, which is perfect because switching operations on here are probably going to be 1 or 2 cars at the most, depending upon their size. So that shows you how I hand lay track, and it's a very brief preview of coming attractions when we do stuff with the cassettes. So see you guys here next time on Make It with Calvin.